April 25th, 1994, it was a beautiful day here in DeLand, Florida.
On that day, 15-year-old high school freshman by the name of Laralee Spear was having a busy day as usual. This young lady was highly involved in a lot of activities. She was involved in church, where she was part of the youth group and sang in the choir. She was very involved at school, where she was part of many organizations. She had just made the JV cheerleading team, and she was also a straight A student, making A's in every single class. She was planning to become a doctor. On that day, she was dropped off at this intersection right here, like she always was, by herself, which was also normal. That's because her parents' house, the home she lived in, was just down this road here, a dirt road that the bus couldn't really get down. It's about a quarter of a mile down that road where the house was. On this day, though, sadly, she'd never made it home. We're going to tell you more about her story. This case, unfortunately, has never been solved, even though this happened all those years ago. Hopefully, it can be solved. We cordially invite you to come along.
Come along.
What do you want to say in the beginning? I don't know. We'll just make up something.
Laralee, what's your birthday?
June 21st, 1978. How do you feel when somebody sticks a camera in your face?
Laralee didn't do things behind her parents' backs. She didn't keep secrets from them. She did not have a secret boyfriend, or even a boyfriend at all. On the day of her murder, she was wearing a maroon-colored t-shirt and jean shorts. It was confirmed by the bus driver and Laralee's friends that she was dropped off that afternoon, right here, at the corner of Spring Garden Avenue and Deerfoot Road, where she lived with her parents, Barbara and David, along with her sister Jenny, who was 13 at the time, as well as one other sister. After the murder, Barbara and David were horrified, with no idea how to explain what happened to Laralee's two sisters.
Every day, not a day goes by that I don't think about her. I always wonder what she would think of Christmas or Thanksgiving, her birthday. I always wonder where she'll be at. If things were different, if somebody had just left her alone that day and let her live. What life would be like with her here. I'm sure it would have been a lot happier.
One detective who worked on the case has said he thinks she walked about 200 yards down this road before she was grabbed by her killer and forced into his vehicle.
As she walked home, Laralee met the face of evil.
She got dropped off the bus around 3:15 and normally made it home at around 3:30.
Her house would have been right up that driveway there behind us. Now, her mom began to get worried shortly after her normal arrival time. She said that Laralee was very punctual always. She never was late getting home. The only time she'd be late is she stopped to look at some horses at a neighbor's house down the road. So she first called that neighbor. Her mother Barbara did, and the neighbor said, no, she's not here. She called some of her friends. She got on the bus at the normal time. Then at 4:05, Barbara called the police. Now, typically in a case like this, the police will say, well, could be the child ran off, the child is at school still. They don't really start looking. Normally it's like a 24-hour rule, but not in this case, because they knew this girl was very punctual. She was in a great mood when she left school that day. She's not the type to run away from home or to not be home when she said she's going to be home. So immediately, they began a search party all through this area, trying to find Laralee. Officers were called to the Spear home just 8 minutes after the 911 call, and just 8 minutes after that, they arrived here. At 4:59 that afternoon, the sheriff's office had its helicopter called Air 1 join in the search for Laralee. At 5:35, one of the deputies in Air 1 spotted something behind an abandoned house just down the street from Laralee's home. Deputies on the ground were sent to that spot, where they found the body of Laralee Spear.
We are now walking up to the spot where Laralee's body was found.
Her parents' house, the home that she was, of course, going to where she lived at the time, was only 200 yards down the road in that direction from this spot right here. Now, at this spot, at the time, there was a burned outhouse that had burned about a year previously. This was a spot where apparently a lot of kids used to come party and do drugs. They'd secured the area and put some kind of fencing around and tried to stop people from going in there, but it wasn't really stopping people from going in there. A lot of people locally feel that this points to it being a local person, because who would know about this spot right down the road from her house to be able to quickly come down here with her to a spot where obviously no one was living at the time. The killer had ripped off some of Laralee's clothes during the assault. Police found those clothes strewn along this dirt road leading away from the burned out house. They had apparently been thrown out of the window of the killer's vehicle. Police say they assume the killer attempted to assault Laralee and beat her up in the process. She had defended herself as best as she could, apparently putting up a pretty good fight, even though the killer had tied her wrists together. We spoke via email with Lieutenant Omar McKnight with the Volusia County Sheriff's Office Investigative Services Section. He told us when asked what kind of material was used to tie Laralee's wrist, that information is being withheld from public dissemination as we treat it as a detail only the perpetrator should know. The killer quickly gave up on the assault. Police assume he was probably young, maybe even another teenager, and may have never done something like this before. At some point in the attack, he freaked out and shot her multiple times in the back of the head. She was found in a pool of blood on a concrete slab behind the burned-out house. There were tire tracks found leaving the scene. After the murder, investigators began canvassing the area around here, going door to door and asking anyone who had talked to them if they saw or heard anything. No one had heard a thing, even though a gun had been fired at least 3 times in the middle of the afternoon. An elderly man in a wheelchair normally sat outside on his porch in the afternoon. Unfortunately, on this day, he was not feeling well, so he did not come outside. Police then asked the public for help, wanting to know if anyone saw anything suspicious in the area that afternoon. It was then when they got the first break in the case. 5 different people called saying they had seen a newer model black pickup truck, probably a Ford, in the area at that time. They also spoke to Laralee's bus driver, who told them he also saw a black pickup truck. He said it was following behind the bus for a while that afternoon. When police talked to students who were on the bus, one of the students who was sitting toward the back of the bus also remembered seeing a black truck behind the bus during the ride that afternoon. Neither the student nor the bus driver saw the black truck again after Laralee was dropped off. After talking to the 7 people who saw the black truck that day, police were able to figure out the driver was a white male with long sandy blonde hair who was in his late teens or early 20s. During the 6 months after Laralee's murder, police investigated around 1,000 leads, talked to Laralee's friends and family, and had around 24 suspects at one point in the case, but they did not have enough evidence to arrest anyone.
Then in November, police got the break they thought they were looking for when they found what they believed to be the pickup truck from the day of the murder. The truck was found in Weiss County, Virginia, and was owned by a 20-year-old man by the name of Bobby Allen Riley, who was already in jail, charged with murdering 2 men on June 5, 1995 in Volusia County, Florida, in a drug-related situation. A jailhouse informant told police Bobby told him he was the one who murdered Laralee. Police also did a lineup and brought in a student from the bus who had seen the black truck. She picked Bobby in a lineup. In January of 1995, he was indicted for the murder of Laralee Spear. Investigators felt they had a strong case, but it certainly wasn't perfect. When they had Bobby's truck brought back to Florida, they began to search it for anything tying him to the crime scene, whether that be particles from the item used to tie her up, or hair, or blood from Laralee. However, they didn't find anything in the truck linking him to the crime scene or to Laralee. They also took samples of his spit, blood, hair, and got his fingerprints to test against samples they found on Laralee. Nothing matched, and they still hadn't found the murder weapon. There was another issue. Bobby's truck didn't even match the description from the 7 witnesses. Witnesses said it was a black Ford, but Bobby's truck was a blue Mitsubishi. Also, Bobby had short dark hair, not the long sandy blonde hair witnesses had described. To top it all off, the lineup wasn't done correctly either. Investigators had Bobby walk into the lineup room well after all of the other participants were already there, which would have made it easier for the witness from the bus to pick him. Then there was another issue, which was Bobby pled guilty to the murder of 2 men and was sentenced to death, but he was still strongly denying killing Laralee. Eventually, all charges against Bobby were dropped. Laralee's family was devastated, and investigators had to start their investigation all over again. Over the past several years, the black truck may have been ruled out as having anything to do with the murder after all. Lieutenant McKnight told us, through further investigation, the facts and circumstances surrounding the black truck have been unable to be verified of actually having any involvement in this incident. When we asked Lieutenant McKnight if they had a main suspect at this point in time, he said, "Unfortunately, at this point in the investigation, anyone except those already eliminated could potentially be a suspect with no specific person identified as being a main one." Apparently, police do have some samples from the scene, perhaps including a hair sample and fingerprints, but they haven't been able to find a match. Lieutenant McKnight told us, "We have collected numerous items of evidence. Unfortunately, none can be directly linked to a suspect at this time. However, with future advancement of forensic science, we are hoping to have items we've collected be suitable for testing to resolve the case."
I think for all of us that pin a badge on in the morning and take it off at night, there are some murders like this where a 15-year-old so close to her home. I think for generations of deputies in the Volusia County Sheriff's Office, everybody wants to see this case closed.
I can only beg, and I hate to say that, but if you know something, please just come forward. Just tell something. Even if you think it's the most useless piece of information, just speak up. One little thing can make a world of difference, can bring peace to Laralee, can bring us hope and closure.
Just over a year ago, in April of 2021, police doubled the reward to $50,000 for anyone who gives them information that leads to an arrest and conviction in the case. Laralee's parents are now retired and closing in on being 80 years old. They just want justice for their daughter. Hopefully they will see that happen at some point in their lifetime, although it doesn't seem too likely at the moment. Omer McKnight told us, "The murder of Laralee Spear is something that has haunted the community since 1994. Ever since that day, the Volusia Sheriff's Office has been pursuing who is responsible in an effort to get justice for Laralee and bring closure to her family."
The time to tell the truth is now. We can put together 99 pieces of a 100-piece puzzle, but someone who's out there has that last piece. So we ask, if you know anything, please let us know.
If you know anything, no matter how small the detail may seem, please call 386-254-1537 or email coldcaseunittips@vcso.us.